Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who has no name and is but 2 days old.
Tim Longo.
Yeah, I suspect you probably didn't get that far. I think that was in the second session playing.
Didn't, no.
No, that's a V. V walks around and quotes poetry from a book that he's carrying.
Yeah.
And that's
I saw that.
That's a William Blake poem that he quotes.
Okay.
Something about an infant, a new infant or something like that. Anyway, this is a little bonus episode to talk about the latest entry in the Devil May Cry series, Devil May Cry 5, which both of us played some of. I think I played a fair amount more than Tim. It is I sort of feel this way like I felt about The Force Awakens. There's a lot of Devil May Cry in this Devil May Cry.
Yeah. Oh, Force Awakens. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars was...
Yeah,
The Force Awakens was a big Star Wars remix. Yeah.
The formula,
and this is very much, wow, this is so Devil May Cry. I mean, it's it sands away a lot of rough edges and things like that. It's definitely more modern in a lot of respects, but all of it's still there. All of it. I mean, just everything is still there, sometimes with more characters and things like that, but it's still very much the same game. So It was very impressive just from that standpoint. So what were your initial impressions?
Well, yeah, I mean, down to like some of the UI sounds, the audio, like the first sound you hear,
I laughed.
Loading up. It's like the same exact sound. It's crazy.
I literally laughed on the stream.
Yeah, the mission flow, the upgrade presentation, it's definitely modernized in some ways, but like we were talking about in pre-show, I feel like playing the very first one in its kind of retro form and then jumping straight to this one with such an amount of time that has passed and seeing and skipping all the in-between phases, which they've actually for any series being this consistent with sequels is actually pretty impressive, in that time frame to get to 5. I guess, God of War is another example.
Actually, it's even the 6th because Ninja
Theories. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
as well.
That spinoff. Yeah. So, or whatever that was, reimagining. But it was so weird because it felt like almost like we just kept continuing to play the game, the same game. Yeah. And I think in my initial thoughts were that was a good thing. Because a lot of the complaints that I had about the original, it feels like you can feel that they have been iterating on, throughout all of the entries, but then choosing to keep certain things pretty much as they were, but just polishing them up or something, And I think that's a really good sign that they kind of know what they are and lean into that, and then just sort of keep refining it versus say the difference between like Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 4,
right.
And then even 7, right? They've made some bigger jumps with that series, maybe through necessity. I don't know. They've, I guess, overall have had more of them with all those spinoffs of Resident Evil, but this one felt fine. It felt good. A lot of the complaints that I had in the first one, they were fine, especially camera, level design, things like that. So,
well, and I think that also this series probably has informed Resident Evil in the sense that this is a game, of course, it was originally going to be an entry and then kind of split off, and they even nod to that in some of the, I don't know if you got far enough, but they mentioned this guy Tony Angelo, who was, I guess, the original character. They just throw that in there to remind you that this is
really?
began life. Yeah, in this, I don't know, it's probably a few hours in some cutscene. It's a total throwaway line. I don't know if it's going to come back, but it's I guess I just mean in terms of, I think the original influenced Resident Evil 4 in terms of being more action oriented, less of the tank, can't control my character. And even though they haven't gone full on to this kind of fluidity of control, because I think it's too power fantasy to do that in Resident Evil. Nonetheless, I mean, playing, like you said, playing RE7 or even 4 is such a huge difference from the first game that it can't help feel like they felt the external influence maybe from inside the building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just really appreciate the iterations that they've been making, especially in the camera, like I mentioned, at least in 5, having full right stick camera control if you want it, but then they do script cameras as well. So, and they try to have them be intelligently scripted via, or, it's probably maybe this combination of scripted and programmatic, but based on the level designs, I think they've definitely found a better balance there between the two. I didn't feel like I was fighting it very often, if at all. And it was a lot less of a concern for me. And I actually, even the first one had a certain amount of exploration, right? But you didn't have camera control, so it was really, really hard and worrisome to kind of do that. But in this one, I felt like I could stop and look around more and take things in. And so that I had assumed that they would have gotten there in the series, based on what we kind of know from being an outsider. But it was nice to just go from the 90s to 2019 on this and see such a big jump. So I've appreciated that for sure. And then just the structure of the game in general. It's almost like just, I don't want to say like that they just modded the original or did a remaster, but it feels very much like the footprint. They're stepping within the same footprint of the previous one or of the original. And it's kind of down to, we were talking in pre-show too, down to some of the specific moves that you do are exactly the same button combinations.
Yep.
Which is having
which makes me feel like maybe that's why I had a leg up coming into this game. Like it just felt okay because I'd literally just been doing this for 4 weeks.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I immediately jumped into, what's that one where you thrust forward?
The Stinger.
Yeah. So I immediately bought that, and it works the same way, and I immediately exploited it.
Yeah.
And I was juggling, and then they add in juggling's even more elaborate and easy to do in this modern version. Then you have the grapple you throw in there. And so they took some of those core tenets that we talked about in the first one and just have expanded upon them, and you feel like a god when you're playing this stuff. And it's a lot less effort to do all of that stuff. You feel very smooth doing it. You feel like you're not fighting it as much.
Yeah, they're letting you have the core fantasy and be cool all the time instead of only when you're watching a cutscene where the character's cool. Right?
Yeah.
Although there are plenty of those. There are a number of times when something really wild would happen and I'd go, man, I wish I was doing that.
Yeah.
And I kind of get that spectacle is its own reward. It's like getting to watch, something like the Raid, the Raid Redemption or something like that in the middle of your Devil May Cry game. You see these crazy, Hong Kong action style, parkour, etc. Flipping through, having a car land on your head, but the door was open and then it flips over or whatever. I mean, it's just insane, some of the stuff that they do. And I get the whole, like, oh, it's cool to see those as rewards. But at the same time, the cooler that stuff is, the more I'm like, boy, wouldn't it be cool if I could do that? So,
Right. Well, and
it's always a risk with cutscenes.
I think some of those God moments in the first one would only come, at least in the gameplay, would only come if you really mastered how to use all the moves, and really get good at combining them together, in a specific way. So very few people would see that. But yeah, on the cutscene differentiation, that's definitely true. I think though the camera doesn't do this, I would say that there were definitely some things that felt like you could, the spirit of them you could do in gameplay. Obviously, you're not running on walls and stuff, but you're doing crazy stuff even in gameplay that feels camera stuff aside, feels very over the top, and that was cool.
Yeah,
and then
that's definitely true. And you can do all these, you can power up your devil hand or whatever. I forget what it's even called, but your devil
breaker.
arm, the right arm, the breaker, right?
Devil
so
breaker.
you can power that thing up and do just wild attacks with it if you power it up. But you lose it if you get hit. So there's also these sort of timing risk rewards and things like that. That's actually something that I'm finding I should be doing more of. I finally caught on to that. I just wasn't doing a lot of that, and not probably at the right times. But yeah, I mean, it's those are pretty fascinating when they happen as well.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I appreciated from sort of a comparison of old to new that we talked a little bit about in pre-show is just the enemies translation to the modern era. You have the banshees flying around, you have the reapers, you have the bug things that you briefly kind of saw in the first one.
Right, the Anpusas, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of, they definitely have the modern take, and I'm sure the in-between entries in the series had similar sort of progressions, so I don't know how many of them are new to this game, but it all felt, appropriate, and again, it's just like playing, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example. There's so many movies that have been remade multiple, Stars Born, you're watching Stars Born,
right.
all the sort of 5 iterations or whatever that movie's gone through with all sort of with each era of filmmaking. And it's kind of like that kind of same feeling where you're like, yeah, this is very comfortable and very, feels very similar to what I just did. But it's like, in my case, I'm playing on PC. It's like, it's on my badass PC, and fully rendered and beautiful, and smooth, and with all the modern trappings of the complaints that I would have had. So seeing all the bosses kind of fully rendered and fully realized was neat as well.
Yeah. Did you get to that boss with the big mouth in his belly?
Yeah. That was hilarious.
I mean, that's just over the top.
Yeah. That was a great battle.
Gigantic, and that was a great battle.
And then the engine.
He worked me pretty good. So, but it was fun.
I think I did use one golden.
That's the only time I have in the 7 or 8 hours I've played was that one battle, and I realized that again it was probably that I wasn't using the breaker arms as much as I should have been.
Yeah.
So, I think not using them in that powered up way, I guess, was kind of the big thing, because I actually would explode them a lot, but that was the thing I was doing, was like grapple up to them, explode, jump away, and then I didn't have any. I was like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
So
the grapple is so cool. I mean, it's such a good. I don't know if that's new to Nero or to this game or not, but it's such a good problem solving design for one of the natural things that will happen with these kinds of games. It seems like, because as you're doing more damage and moving around the arena, right, especially with multiple enemies or a big enemy like that's doing big jumps and stuff, like the worst thing is when you have to run to catch up to something or to move around the arena to get to something, because you're like, I just want to be moving fast and swinging on my sword, swinging my sword and shooting my gun, and I don't want to have to run over to this thing. I just want to be there. And this grapple just is a solution for Nero, where you just, you either bring it to you or you go to it, and it's just closes that distance really well. And so if you can get a good rhythm, it's just a good problem solver.
And it helps. That is one of the problems I had trying to execute combos in the first game, is that often I would do a stinger or whatever, and it would knock the thing back. It's like, okay, well, now they've been knocked back, but now I got to get close again.
Yeah, you'd be out of range.
And you're out of range, and it's hard to pull off the same thing again and again and again. And the engine doesn't tend to like that in terms of, and it takes time, and maybe you don't have enough time. And so, I mean, I sort of think that the taunt and the guns were both meant to be ways to deal with that, in the terms of like, you can taunt, and that's going to drive up your coolness meter or whatever, and the guns will sort of keep it going, but you're still not closing very closely, and it's really sort of your main attack that is your sword, typically, that is the thing that really is your moneymaker as far as that goes. So And that single element of I can close this distance more quickly with a press of a button is really great.
And then a quick, related to the grapple, a quick call out to great sort of onboarding into a boss fight. They teach you that the grapple, you can use the grapple in combat, and they teach you the basics of that. And then they teach you can use the grapple to certain points to get over certain obstacles, right? Mm-hmm. And then they have a boss, that flying boss, where in the boss fight, there's these things that once you damage sort of turn into similarly looking grapple points. The one I'm talking about, the flying boss that like kind of had a mermaid tail, and then the lady came out of it at the end.
Oh, right. Yes.
Well, literally the lady being the name of the person.
Yes.
Lady.
Yes.
Yes. Mixed opinion on that one, but anyway, I guess she's a canonical character. But
yes.
But like part of that battle, those little things, those little orbiting things that come out, right? You once you damage those, they turn into grapple points, and you can get up there. If it's, I think she kind of goes into a health recharge state or something, and so the only way you can get up there is to use them. But it's like, you've been using them in the previous levels to get around places, and you're like, oh, wait a second, those look kind of like those grapple points. I wonder if I can grapple to them, And so it didn't take a lot of teaching to get me there, and I believe that's something we talked about with the first game, right? They weren't good at that yet. They didn't know how to do it as well as they should. And so they've clearly learned some great lessons along the way to improve that challenge.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's a good call out, that boss in particular, being a really interesting battle from that perspective of teaching you something new. Like, I didn't necessarily feel that with the big hulking thing with the fire in its belly.
No, or I missed it if there was something.
Yeah, there may have been something that I just didn't quite catch on to, but and maybe it was just like learning to dodge and stuff. I mean, it could have been just simply something that simple, but yeah, it's pretty great. I also, I want to call out to V.
We should talk about.
Or 5, as I call him.
No, wait a second. No, it's V. You mean Kylo Ren?
Yeah, Adam Driver. Yeah, I already picked up on that one. Another reference for Star Wars, I guess. He's of course Virgil. No surprise.
Oh, really?
Well, he's partly Virgil.
I figured there was something going on with him. So Virgil. So I watched that little opening, or that. Did you watch the history of Red? Devil May Cry?
I did not watch the. Oh yes, at the beginning. No, I didn't watch it. I was streaming. I didn't want to watch it.
Oh yeah. Well, it wasn't great, but it did go through. Yeah, try to catch you up. Yeah, I think.
But I don't care about any of that. So.
Well, no, but I mean, you brought up that V could be Virgil, which Anyway.
No, he is, because they then explain how he is, but he's not.
It's not
straight up.
Okay, got it.
So because one of the other things I like that's new, right, is their storytelling technique of going back and forth in time. The bulk of the game, and you may not have seen too much of this, but I mean the game sort of starts on May 15th or 3rd or something like that. I don't remember exactly when they're inside fighting this thing, and it's too tough for them, and Dante says the kid's dead weight, and he called me dead weight. Okay, and they run out. And then it flips forward to June 15th or something like that. But then even in that section, it'll go back and forth little bits. Mm-hmm. V was literally born 2 days before or whatever. So it's
oh really?
It's really,
so I'm
why
playing as V, but I haven't gotten very far.
Yeah. So there's a little thing. It's a while before you get to that. That was right at the end, I think, of my session. But I really like that. I mean, it just, it's not something new we've seen in games, but it is new to this series, or at least of the ones we've played. It was not in the first game, I should say.
Right.
Where you're jumping back and forth in time like this. And it was neat how it kind of expanded. Why is this person here? How did this person get there? What happened to these people? How is it that lady is that thing, that she's that demon.
Mm-hmm.
So it just, that's all just super neat. Later on, you'll get a motorcycle you can fight with as well. So
yeah. Well, I heard, maybe I saw that in the trailer originally or something, but is your sword, because your sword has a motorcycle grip / accelerator on it, Nero's sword, right? He puts it in the ground and you can rev it up, which is hilarious and awesome.
Right.
I assume that sword has something to do with the motorcycle?
It does not.
Oh, it's separate.
This is one that Dante has.
Oh, so okay.
One of the bosses he defeats, as the pieces come flying off, they attach to some motorcycle that got cut in half earlier in the scene.
Okay.
It's madness.
Oh.
Right? Who knows why, right? And it just basically reassembles into a motorcycle that's in two pieces that he can wield with his two arms.
Amazing. God, they just do whatever. It's crazy.
Whatever they want to do.
Yep. Yeah. I guess there's anime influence there and things, but it's pretty impressive. The other example that I'm going to call out, and just I think a great opening sort of section is when the credits, sort of the first main credits play, and there's that slow motion shot of Nero basically he's spinning and tumbling all around the van as the van is spinning and tumbling, and you see all of the.
Oh no, that's amazing.
He goes out the window, spins basically around the van as you're seeing all the names kind of in the environment, and then goes back in the same window somehow. It's amazing, and he's killing.
It is pretty extraordinary
all along the way. Yeah, and the music's great. They definitely have found their identity on the music. Just the heavy metal / combination of all sorts of other things in there. Really, really like tight identity when it comes to a franchise at this point. So I definitely give them. Yeah, I'm bummed I didn't get to the motorcycle because I heard so much about it. But I love the fact that Nero's sword has a motorcycle revving grip on it, which is hilarious.
Right, and you can do it with the L2, I guess.
Yeah,
power up your attacks, and it's just like, oh, you can make your next attack even better.
Yep.
And again, you lose it if you get smacked or something bad happens, but it's still just going on out there. We're just gonna do the weird thing. It's pretty funny.
The other thing we talked about in pre-show a little bit, that to go back to the boss with the fire in his belly, thought that was a good example of showing off the engine, specifically the physics and stuff. Like, this engine has come a long way, this RE engine, and that boss battle, just the scale of it, but also like the destruction that happens, from it. He's throwing you around, he's jumping around. It just looks great. He looks great. The animations in general are just like, best in class when it comes to just how it's all fitting together from an animation standpoint, especially the main characters. But I wonder, is my impression from watching the video, jumping back to your V example, sounds like you liked that character quite a bit too.
Yeah.
Do you know? It feels like from the history video that I watched that in the other games you might be swapping characters.
I wouldn't be surprised
around as well, but I don't think you've ever swapped 3 characters. But I think, like, because Nero was introduced maybe in 2, so 3, by the way, is a prequel. If you didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't know that. I've heard good things about 3. People, in fact, one of the letters tonight, I think, says you can skip 2, but 3 is really good. I recommend you play 3.
It's funny, too, because in that video, I'm sure it's intentional, but my memory of watching it is that I've heard that 2 is kind of like the stinker, if you will, of the series.
Yeah.
In that history video, like 2 is like mentioned like one frame or something, and then they just move on.
Like, we're not going to talk about
this. We're like, something happened.
We're not going to.
Yeah. So, but then they cover 3 quite a bit, and it looks like it's a prequel. That's where they introduce Virgil, I think, and then something happens to him, and then Nero's in maybe 4. Anyway, interesting. It's so fascinating to play these back to back. Like, I feel like even when we play God of War back to back, You know what I mean? Like there was enough of a difference from where they took that franchise that it felt like, yes, it's Kratos. Yes, there's similarities, but enough, gameplay changes have happened between the progression of that series very intentionally, right? Especially in the way that combat and camera work, that it, sort of just almost in namesake that it was the same series. But this feels very much like, anyone who I'm sure anyone who is listening who's loved the series the whole time and has been a fan must just be so happy with this particular game coming out. It just feels like
you gotta be. You gotta be. Yeah. I mean, the craft on display is just astonishing. It's just, I mean, for all the reasons you mentioned, the technology is fantastic, and all of the various art departments are just, they're firing on all cylinders, as it were. So they really revved up their engines, I guess, to deliver this thing, because it is pretty amazing.
They still are not maturing with the way they're handling the female characters.
No, they are not.
So that's definitely still a bummer. Can't obviously defend the Kojimas of the world either. So there's definitely not many good examples, unfortunately, in this area. But yeah,
I will say that this was, however, edited for North America.
Cool.
And it's really disturbing to me that the female bodies are Barbie dolls.
Yeah.
Like, if you're gonna show, just show. I mean, that's a weird choice that I know that's a thing that happened, and I just don't get it. Presumably, like, this is an M for mature game. In theory, we're mature enough to just be able to. Yes, the treatment of women is no better than in the original, but come on. There's that, and then there's, but this looks strange and kind of grotesque. I don't know. That's a bizarre choice to me.
Yeah.
And that happened, I'm sure, above their pay grade.
Yeah, right. Well, the new character, Nico, specifically, is sort of on multiple levels, just kind of a bit of a tone deaf character, so not even just the female side of it, but also just the stereotype side of it. So, I mean, it's definitely a game about many different types of stereotypes, but they just made some bad calls on how to utilize sort of archetypes, I guess, if you will. They chose the wrong archetypes in that regard. So I haven't gotten too far with any of the, like, Lady, what happens to her and all, because I ended literally
having defeated
her
come out of the whatever. Yeah.
And so I know from the history video that she is, I guess, she was together with Dante or something, and she was in that opening cinematic, right? She had been downed on the ground, and so was the lady from the first game was there, look like, but Beatrice, yeah. Trish, right. So yeah, that's a bummer. There's also there's some similarities to, I don't know how much you played of the Dead Rising series. It's actually, I do like that series.
I only played some of the first one, actually.
Yeah, no, I played them all. I didn't finish 4, but I played a lot of 3 and 1. And yeah, a lot of similar problems that it's Capcom as well. So with just how they're dealing with stereotypes and stuff. So I just want to mention that really quick, but we don't have to dwell on it, but just it's interesting to play.
We can be critical about the stuff that's not great just as much as we can laud. There's been so much positive to say. We should not really give them a pass on the garbage.
Yeah. So, and the other funny reference to totally shift gears that is another sort of franchise identity is sort of lock and key stuff. And so far I've only gotten it's just so funny because, we played the original and it's very Resident Evil, like you're finding this crest or this gem and you're putting it in this random thing and then you open the door for no apparent reason. Here, so far at least, you're finding these bugs that then go inside this wound of this devil, hellish, grotesque growth or something. I don't know. It's like, yeah, still lock and key, but they sure found a way to mix it up. I was like, what?
Yeah, for sure. And then the other aspect of that is you've found the things where you have to hit the berries basically and make the thing make the plant go dead.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, as a blocker.
It's very much the same sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not an object that you have to pick up, but you have to find the lock and beat it.
Yeah, right.
Right. So it's kind of similar that way. But yeah, I mean it's a twist, and he does say something the first time he does it, or maybe the second time he does it, he goes something like this again.
This again, yeah.
Yeah, we're really doing this again. I think he says something like that.
They're a little they're self-aware, which is somewhat, a little bit at least, is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. They're there, as far as that goes, saying, yeah, this is a game thing that we do. Sorry, but we're still doing it.
Yeah, maybe you want to
find some way to gate.
And maybe you want to go back to I think I said this during playing the original, but I still want to go back to Metal Gear Rising. That's a world that I love, but it's very much like, because that was really the first modern one of these that I had played probably ever or in a long, long time, So, and I love Metal Gear, and so that it feels very much like that. So, but it's Raiden, so it's like he's got cool ninja swords and stuff, but really larger than life, and it's platinum, so the legacy's there.
Right, and that's they made like Vanquish as well, right? So that's
and Bayonetta, right?
And Bayonetta, yeah.
So I think it's the same team, but
yeah, I have as I mentioned, I have Bayonetta 1 and 2 to play on the Switch. Yeah.
So. Speaking of, did you see that? You probably did, but the original that we just played is coming out on Switch.
Yes, we actually somebody tweeted at us at the Twitter account.
Figured as much.
Yeah, I will probably not pick that up because all that adds is for me to play it on a different TV in my house.
Right.
Because I don't leave the house enough really to take my Switch anywhere. Because my commute is 2 flights of stairs.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky.
Definitely liked what I was playing of V though, and it's very interesting and I've heard people talk about another podcast, just the mixing up of how that character plays and against expectations for the series, where it's sort of an indirect combat character, which is I think a really cool idea, and it feels fairly well implemented as far as what little I've played.
When you get to Dante, you also get to customize him a little bit more. He has 4 distinct identities that go to the D-pad.
Dante does?
So, yes.
Oh,
they're not physical identities. I mean, gameplay styles.
Oh, like stances or something?
One is to lean into the sword stuff. One is to lean into the gun stuff. One is to be more defensive, I believe, and then one maybe is, I can't remember if it's maybe just more nimble, like he can get around a lot quicker.
That's a lot of stuff.
So you additionally have that, right? And those are just different things that you can power up on the mission, or by spending orbs. Frozen devil blood.
Yeah,
as the orbs turn out to be.
Even the orbs. The modern version of the orbs is hilarious to me. They still have faces. They still look super weird and kind of dumb, but it's like they're like, nope, this is Devil May Cry. We're doing it.
This is what we do.
Yeah. So it definitely feels like a good callback. Just like, let's just make the Devil May Cry fans happy. You know what I mean? Like in every way. Obviously, I haven't played the Ninja Theory one, which I've heard fairly good things about, some a bit divisive, but
I think what normally happens with Ninja Theory is people are like, wow, this plays really well, and it's not the people, characters, story, etc. that I'm used to, and you messed with it or whatever. They do things like that people don't like. Samus, that Metroid Samus Returns or whatever it was.
Oh no,
Other M.
No way. So
Other M is what I mean.
Right, but that was Team Ninja. Right.
Oh,
Ninja Theory.
I'm sorry. I've got those two mixed up.
Oh, I do it all the time. No, Ninja Theory, the Heavenly Sword British,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Team
wow.
Ninja
Okay, yeah.
did Other
Did
M.
Other M. Okay, that is definitely what I had in mind as for the DMC whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it was a
okay.
Western,
Yeah.
right? It was like
My mistake. Yeah. Okay.
Western studio doing,
Well, yeah. I mean, but you can definitely see the chance to mess it up there too, right?
Oh yeah.
That's an interesting.
Well, and
Definitely an interesting
Ninja
choice.
Theory has their kind of, their sort of gameplay mechanical style, as well. So they're definitely versed in those kinds of games, but it's inherently going to be different. But I'm sure.
I'm not sure I've played any Ninja Theory games.
Yeah, I played Heavenly Sword and
I played Hellblade.
Then Hellblade. Yeah.
I didn't play Heavenly Sword, but I did play Hellblade.
Yeah. So interesting.
I forgot that was them. So they're under your bailiwick now.
They're under Microsoft. Yeah. Microsoft purchased them. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting history to this sucker. But you can see definitely a return to form here. So I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, pretty impressive game. I will continue to play it. I don't know when I'm going to fit it in between Diablo 3 and Kingdom Hearts 2 and all the few games I have left in that series. And I'm playing the Jak and Daxter remaster. At least the next game we're playing is going to be short.
What's the next story, Kingdom Hearts story? What's the update there?
I have no update there. That's the sad fact. I have not played since the last time I updated.
Okay. So you're in the middle of 2 right now?
Yeah, I'm very close to the end of 2. I was doing all the cleanup stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a pretty good spot.
So all I have to do is go to the end of that one. Yeah, I just got distracted. I had to catch up to you in Diablo 3 and far surpass you.
Yeah, I can't catch up. I'm at 200 Paragon, but I can't. Yeah, so at least for the season, I won't make it to where. Yeah, I'm still playing though.
Yeah, I haven't played that in a few days, so it's just too many games. Yep. It's just too many games.
That's sure. That's for sure.
Well, let's put Devil May Cry behind us, at least for discussion on the cast. We're going to turn to some email. But of course, you were going to remind me first.
Oh, no, I was not, because I told you I don't remind people things because I don't remember things.
I actually, since I forgot to do my book recommendation at the end of last episode, which is normally when I would have done it, I decided to throw in a second one that it probably ties more into DMC 5. We talked a lot about sort of cultural appropriation in talking about the original game, just something we kind of stumbled into. And I wanted to recommend this book. Now, both of these books are dark. I'm just going to come right out front and say this. They are dark. The first one is pitch black, so beware. If you love Takashi Miike films or whatever, fine, you'll be fine. But you have to have a strong stomach, probably, especially for the first one. This is a book by Ryu Murakami called In the Miso Soup. It's about a young, younger than me anyway, Japanese man who gives an American a bit of a tour through more or less the red light district over a series of days. And I guess what he's importing there, the cultural appropriation, is a bit of a serial killer, and it gets black. So I just want it gets gory and it gets dark, and it is quite a book. I read it; it was recommended to me through like Book Riot or something like that as a particularly gory, scary, maybe October read, and it was both of those things. So there is a sort of descent into hell in that one, but it's not a literal hell. The other one, which is only slightly lighter, is a book called Horror Store. It's a little bit lighter because it sort of parodies like IKEA and other big box stores. What? It's called Horror Store, HORRORSTO with an umlaut R. And it's by Grady Hendrix. I picked this one because it involves the bleeding of a hell dimension into our own. And in this case, it happens in an IKEA type store. It is extremely funny for the first half of the book when it's mostly parody of big box stores, and then the horror starts and it gets to be quite a horror novel as well. So it's an interesting mix by Grady Hendrix. Maybe his second novel. I can't remember exactly. Maybe it might even be his debut. It comes complete with illustrations of different things that they sell in the store, and then maybe the Hell Dimension versions of them. It is quite something.
Why is that not a movie?
It would make a pretty good movie, actually.
Seems like it's perfect. I'm looking it up right now. I want to see if it is, like, if they've optioned it or something. God, it seems like... So, of course, if you look up horror store on the internet, it's not a good idea. It's just not specific enough. But anyway.
No, it's not. So it's one word.
Oh,
horror store with it. So it's like horror story, but with no Y. Okay. Yeah. So just leave the E off.
Here's the book. Yeah. So, yeah. Cool. That's a great recommendation. Oh, I love the cover. Holy, that's amazing.
It's a great cover.
It's like the catalog.
It does. It feels like having a catalog. Yeah, because it has the images inside. It's really good.
Oh, I want to see that movie. Somebody option that. That's great.
Or you could read the book, Tim.
No, I want to see. Well, both. No, I want to see both.
Okay. All right. Well, those are my book recommendations. The horror story is definitely a little lighter. Good
ones.
Yeah.
I'm glad I reminded you.
Yes. Good thing you did. Okay, let's turn to email. Let's see how many we can get through here. We have 4. We might only do 2 because Tim's going to get to his boat. But why don't you go ahead and take that first one there. These, of course, were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com.
Okay, the first one, subject, the process of learning in DMC by Mike Vote?
Usually Vote, yeah.
Vote, right? Yeah. He's written in, hasn't he?
He has written in before, yeah.
Okay. Hi, Mike. Hello, Dev Game Club. Well done on yet another great series. The Devil May Cry is one of my favorite franchises, and despite 3, 4, and I presume 5 all being technically better games, the environment, tight focus, and tone of all this all make this first title my favorite, my personal favorite. Except for that last fight with Nightmare. Yes. Tim, I completely understand walking away at that point. It's a mess. Thank you, Mike. I agree. Also, for Brett, if you're looking for more refined DMC experience, please don't skip the special edition of 3. It's truly a highlight of the PS2 era.
I believe that's what's available in the anthology that I have for the PS3.
Right. It must be.
I may well take a look at that.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the grading system in this game and how this affects its approach to difficulty settings. On the default normal difficulty, a new player who makes it through to the end probably didn't get a lot of S or A level grades, either because they're taking their time exploring levels, experimenting with combos and strategies against enemies, i.e. dying a lot, or burning through a lot of consumables, all of which negatively impact their grade. The grades likely don't mean much on this first playthrough, but if this new player wants to go on to hard mode, or even worse, Dante Must Die, learning the techniques that earn those high-level grades on easier difficulty settings is practically a must in order to succeed when things get tough. I know Devil May Cry is not the only game with multiple difficulty settings, but I can't think of many others that simultaneously let you play the way you want while also explicitly guiding you towards what the developers designed to be the quote-unquote right way to play the harder settings. I wonder if such an approach would work to satisfy both sides of the is Sekiro too hard debate if it had been implemented. Finally, since I haven't asked a question yet, well, you sort of did. Did either of you use Ifrit during your playthrough? I don't think I heard anyone mention it, and I wanted to give it a shout out since a fully charged Ifrit combo is probably the most satisfying video game action ever. Take care, Mike. I did.
Yeah. You did use it. I didn't use it much. I think I used it for literally one battle, and then switched back to the sword. So yeah, did you have a fully charged up?
I don't. So when he says that, I must not have had a fully charged up one. I don't know what he means exactly by that. It must be maybe. Well, I guess he could have meant double trigger wise, or maybe he meant upgraded, like with the red orbs. The one thing I will say, one of the reasons I ended up using it a lot is it has a really good kind of dash up jump and then attack down at a direction of the enemy, and it stuns them every time. So sometimes I would actually resort to it, because even like with the swordsman, the Virgil, turns out to be Virgil whatever Black Knight guy. Yeah. If you use Ifrit on him and you're generally kind of behind him, you basically almost stun lock him. The only trouble is it doesn't do that much damage, so you're basically stun locking him for a long time. So it literally would hurt my hand if I did it too much, but I pretty much could use that particular move on it to stun almost anything. It just kind of, which was gratifying because I discovered that on my own kind of thing. So that was the main reason, but I did have a feeling that I probably was underutilizing it though. So that's good call out.
I expect that's the case. I think that I sort of tend to, we've talked about this before. I tend to pick up whatever the first weapon is, and I'm like, I'm going to use this as long as I possibly can. Yeah. And that's just the way I play games. And or if it's obvious, like, oh, this is the weapon that's different. The equivalent of Indiana Jones's whip. Like, that's all I'm going to use because that's the thing that's different.
Right.
So that tends to be me. It's funny because the Ifrit's definitely different. Or Ifrit. Ifrit. I don't know.
I've heard it both ways. I don't know. Yeah, somebody will correct us.
But I was working so hard on the combos and had invested upgrades already in the sword that I was like, well, that's what I'm going to use.
Yeah,
so
that's the main thing.
Yeah, that's one thing that can happen there is that, of course, these things are getting doled out over time, and you don't know when, and you don't know how, if you haven't played it before, you don't know when you should spend your orbs and when you should wait. So.
Yeah. I do like his point about sort of integrating learning into sort of a difficulty level progression, which is, those words kind of are confusing when you say them like that, but because level progression means something else. But it's interesting to kind of tease out what he's saying as far as the first playthroughs, training you up for how to become really good with the game in a way that you would really kind of need to know the game for later. It's always tricky to say that there is a quote unquote right way to play the game. So I think we all have to be kind of careful with that, but I know what he means. But I think the one distinction that doesn't seem to be the case in Sekiro is, he's kind of specifically talking about replays,
right,
versus the conundrum with Sekiro's. It seems like most people are just barely getting through that once,
Right. And then there's a new game plus.
There is, but I haven't heard many people kind of talk about it that way. But I'm sure the new game plus, you've been so educated by that point that new games plus would be a more, you're coming in with a lot more information. But I think that's one way to put it. Brett and I had sort of a fairly long offline text chain that I don't think he shared online, because he usually shares our text chains. But
not usually, but I didn't share that one.
Yeah, and I kind of went on a bit of a soapbox on it, related to some other folks talking about that whole Sekiro hard mode stuff, and so I think I've run out of steam on getting too deeply into it, but I definitely still seem to have a lot more to say about that whole thing, even though I think we did answer it in someone else's question. But yeah, it's a hard one. No pun intended. Do you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, I have one that's the subject is, quote, "Watch my chicken," unquote, and quote, War and Peace,
What?
unquote, by from Johnny. Good day, gentlemen. I really enjoyed your coverage of Diablo, and especially the interview. This is going back a ways. It reminded me of two things. One, it reminded me that the podcast is a valuable historical record. And two, it reminded me of what it's like to be young and in love. I am, of course, referring to Brett's love for David Brevik. I also had a blast watching your co-op play of Diablo on Twitch. My favorite quotes were, one, Tim saying, this rift is too difficult, but if we beat it, we can get a new keystone. And Brett saying, what does a keystone do? And Tim saying, allow us to get into a more difficult rift. And two, Tim, watch my chicken. I hope you guys can find more games that you can play co-op like this in the future.
Sorry if I blasted people's ears with my laughter, but that was good.
That's okay. I'll mute you.
Watch my chicken. Yeah, I couldn't place where that came from, but apparently it came from my mouth.
That is in the first 5 minutes of Diablo 3 when we played together. The crux. I have a question around turn-based games. You talking a bit about real-time versus turn-based during the Diablo series, with the general conclusion that going real-time was a great decision for Diablo. I'm interested in hearing your discussion on the techniques that developers can use to get around some of the problems that turn-based games come with. Techniques that don't go as far as the Diablo creators employed, i.e. replacing turn-based with real-time. I can't say I've played too many turn-based video games, but I do love tabletop games of all types. They allow you ample time to think, something I do slowly, and they don't require fast reflexes for the player to be good at the game. I sometimes have trouble with real-time games. For example, although I really enjoy watching StarCraft games, I get frustrated trying to play. I think this is because I know I am never going to be any good at the game, partly because of the skill required. And then finally, War and Peace. You mentioned the novel War and Peace when discussing game difficulty and accomplishment in a recent email discussion. I have an anecdote about reading War and Peace. I finished that book and felt a great sense of accomplishment after surviving the ordeal. How clever I was to have finished. Never mind that I did not like the story or any of the characters. Imagine my horror when I realized the book that I had read was actually just the abridged version and not the whole novel.
Oh.
My head spun, reeling with the revelation that there was more to the story and maybe even more characters. The hours I put in were worthless. I had not read War and Peace, only the abridged version. The scar remains fresh to this day, and I don't think I will ever have the courage to make a second attempt. I will never be able to say I have read War and Peace. Keep up the good work. Your most influential reviewer, Johnny, a superset of, but not my real name. Okay, so a little side note. That was the difficulty discussion, actually, that the War and Peace came up in. So call back
some
there.
Scars will never heal, Johnny. You'll have true. Them for the rest of your life, so it's okay. It's just part of it.
That's part of growing up.
Amazing story, though. I love it.
So the crux, which was how do you deal with the issues with turn-based games?
Oh, oof.
So there's, we haven't. I guess we've played some turn-based or games with turn-based combat, and XCOM, and I was thinking Fallout as well.
I mean, Final Fantasy, sort of, right? I mean, with the combat,
yeah, sort of, yeah. The combat sort of real time, and that there's little timers going, but it's sort of turn-based.
I think it depends on what problem he's trying to solve, to be honest. I think it depends on the goals of the turn-based game. As an example, and then you have more experience with this, so I'll shut up. But as an example, what's the name is escaping me right now, but the FTL guy's second game, Into the Breach, right? There, I believe, though I will fully admit I haven't played it, but as it is described, there is essentially a rewind mechanic or a try over mechanic kind of thing, and they shifted that game more toward almost like puzzle chess than a hardcore tactical game. And so I think it sounds like a cool problem solving for what they were trying to do with that game. So it still is turn based, it still feels tactical, but you're not as stressed or worried about making the right call all the time. because you have options, and so again, I can't speak intelligently about it because I haven't played it, but so many people have talked about, and I've watched some videos. So it's like, I don't know, it just seems like they did something outside of the box thinking for a quote unquote turn-based game, but sometimes that isn't what you want to do. Sometimes you want it to have some of that. You want the stakes to be high, and thus it will, like Johnny said, alienate some people who don't want to, get into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that we were mostly talking about with Diablo going to real time was that it became immediate in a way that it was, maybe plotting would be maybe too strong to say, but certainly a little more cerebral to play, sort of turn-based RPGs of the time. And so that's often a trade-off, is like he points out, having the time to think, because it doesn't matter when you take your turn. It can still be agonizing if you've got permadeath, as David pointed out in his interview, but turn-based does lack a sort of immediacy. It's sort of the accumulation of a lot of stuff that is what makes each moment matter so much more. But the immediacy has a lot going for it. They're just solving different problems. They're just different tastes. I don't know, as you sort of pointed out, it sort of depends what your goals are. So, I mean, one of the problems with more immediate games, real-time games, is that the skill ceiling, or even the skill floor, might be too high for you to reach. So it makes it difficult for you to compete. But that's, again, just kind of a taste, right? I mean, you can play chess with a 10-minute clock, and it's definitely a different feeling game, or play Bug House, where it's really crazy.
Yeah,
that's a four-player variant, 2-on-2. But yeah, I mean, I think it really is just a matter of taste. I wouldn't say it's a thing that you can use to get around the problems. If you want something that's more immediate, then having it be turn-based but with a timer, or maybe some kind of resource, maybe it's not a straight up timer, but like a total time or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Can make something feel more immediate, but that's going to be at the cost of being able to feel like you can make your best moves or what have you. So,
well, another subcategory that I'll throw out there that while you were talking helped me think about, as some examples of things that I have played, and we've played one of them on the podcast that I forgot about, at least in the combat perspective, is Fallout. From a turn-based perspective.
I'm not sure how you forgot it, since I just mentioned it before, but that's
right, until you mentioned it. But I'm saying, before my Into the Breach example, and you mentioned, what have we played? And yeah, but comparing it to a game we haven't played on the podcast, but I always often put them in my mind of two different ways to implement very similar things and what they did differently. And I don't remember if you'd played it back in the day, Brett, but Temple of Elemental Evil.
I have played it, yeah.
Yeah, which was a D&D style famous module brought to life in video game form that I believe it might have been Tim Kane's company that did that game as well before they did Arcanum. But anyway,
I think you're right.
Troika.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
Troika.
But the reason I'm bringing it up is I feel like Fallout had an approach with its turn-based combat of almost like simplifying the systems and the statistics in such a way where you could focus on sort of the core elements of what it means to be. Apparently, some construction going on.
Tim Kane was actually the designer on the game.
Was he? Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Although it was a very pretty strict implementation of the 3.5 rules.
Well, that's my point. Yeah, that's where I was going, is that Fallout simplified, essentially RPG mechanics into a turn-based combat game. Of course, it was gun-based and range-based and blah, blah, blah. But Temple of Elemental Evil, they've slavishly, my memory of it, and one of my frustrations with it, even though I did play it, was that they slavishly stuck to 3.0 rules. and in my opinion, to its detriment, they didn't simplify things down for a video game sort of turn-based combat. So it was almost cumbersome to figure out what was the right thing to do in a turn-based game all the time. And so this is just a long-winded way of saying, if you're going to be doing turn-based game / turn-based combat, especially in an RPG like that, I think having a goal of simplifying down what the essence of it is, rather than being sort of like overly statistical about it. Now, the thing is it still goes back to both of our points of what's your goal, because some people really like the statistical side of turn-based games, and so they don't want that to go away. But, right. In the Diablo conversation, as Brett said, it makes it more immediate, but also we talked a lot about how they ended up having to simplify a lot of the typical RPG mechanics by making it real time, because they're taking away things that you're not worrying about anymore, right? Whether it be statistics or health or whatever, changing the health model and stuff. And so I think that simplification area is I think turn-based, sometimes people feel like gives them the permission to be super nitpicky about all of this, the details, but, may not always be the right call, even though people can take as long as they want because you're turn-based. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what they want to sit there for 2 minutes trying to figure out the next move.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's something we talked about when we did play XCOM, because we referred to the Mario and Rabbids game that was around that time, which shows a means of simplifying that to make that part of it not as hard. It's just, you either can't do this thing, or you have a 50-50 chance, or you have a 100% chance. Those are your options. So you don't have to and like you said, there are people who want to think, okay, I have 75% chance, so I've got to think about how I'm going to hedge my bet. 25%. How much effort am I going to, am I willing to, should I move this person into this position just in case the 25% comes up and I don't make my shot, or, whatever. There are people who love that. It drives me crazy, because it's just too much. And, you end up, just for reasons of wanting to get through the thing, you end up being like, well, 75%, that should happen, right? And then you don't plan for the 25%, and you're annoyed. It's mostly why I don't play these sorts of games very much anymore, is I don't have the time to really work through, like, okay, well, what if this happens? So yeah, anyway, it's so that sort of simplification would be helpful to me, because I'd get the sort of feel of those sorts of games without the a little overwhelming mental gymnastics to think about how you're going to catch, or hedge your bets. So, but yeah, good question. Good question.
Did we hit all the? I've lost track of what else he had in his. Did he have other?
No, I think that's it. I mean, he talked about he had some quotes and talked about War and Peace, and
that's right.
That was the question in the middle.
Yep.
So,
good one.
What do you say we wind down? You've got to go catch a boat.
Yeah, we have 2 more left.
Yep, but we can get to those.
Next time. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So for next time, we have to announce a new game. We've decided to play Myst. We have played other adventure games on the cast. We've never played this one, which is arguably as influential in some ways. So it's definitely time. I'd love to kind of reappraise it.
It's been a long time for me, yeah.
It's been 20 years since Myst came out. It's been longer than that. Yeah, it's been like 25 or something like that. Longer, yeah.
This came out
do
before
that stuff.
It was industry. So.
Yeah. We'll do the history stuff next week. I was just like thinking about it. And I was like, man, no, it's been a while. I would have been playing it around 94, 5, something like that. I don't remember exactly. Anyway, we will put out on the Twitter feed where you should play to. I'll have to do a little research into that. We only decided that tonight. So you can find that on Twitter at DevGameClub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
I stream most nights, Mondays through Thursdays at twitch.tv/Brett Duville. And on the weekends, I play whatever we're playing for the cast. So that will be Myst, and you can join me and probably play all of that game on air as well, just like I did Devil May Cry. So that's all we have for tonight. Thanks again for your emails. We look forward to more reviews in our future. But for now, I will say to you, good night.
Good night.